Terminus Tavern. I am extremely excited to have Therek with us this evening to talk about his Pantheon fan fiction. Um, and I wanted to start off the show by reading his dedication that he wrote for Talen's Tale. I found it very apropos. I want to start off the show with this. It's dedicated to all the weary travelers of realm after realm seeking a home and community, but finding only empty, soulless spaces. Let us meet on Terminus and share an adventure and story we won't soon forget. Um, that just speaks volumes to me about what Pantheon is trying to create and what we're trying to create here on Terminus Tavern. But Therek, welcome. How about you go ahead and say hello and
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, no, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me on. It's very exciting to come on and talk about fan fiction. It's not something that sort of comes up on a regular basis in some of the other forums. So I'm excited to sort of dig into it with you. But
excellent.
yeah, no, thanks for having me and thanks for reading that. I enjoyed hearing that again. I don't go back and read that too often, and I still it's funny how these sometimes things just sort of come to you naturally, right? And I
Uh,
think that's one of those things that did. I mean, it's sort of an easy thing for us in the Pantheon community to sort of relate to because I think we all sort of feel that
right.
longing a little bit. Yeah, no. So I mean, for those that don't know me, I'll just do a quick introduction. Like I've been following Pantheon for a long time. We'll get into that, I guess, but definitely a few years now, and started to really engage about a couple years ago. Just on the forums and getting to know people, watching some of the content creators and interacting and getting to know people, like learning the community and being a part of it. So, and in doing so, I've gotten to know some people fairly well and joined up with Pantheon Plus to sort of help facilitate that content. And so we now we're part of that team. So we do the rewind, we do the a podcast about Pantheon called the Rewind, which is basically like a weekly wrap up of news and notes and community discussions, that kind of thing. And then I also co-host the Pantheon Plus U on every couple Thursdays of every month. The one with the developer after the developer streams. And yeah, that's me. I mean, then obviously, like you said, I'm a learning amateur writer, amateur at best writer, but eager to pursue it and to learn more. So yeah, and thanks again for having me on.
Oh, you bet. Excellent. I'm really pleased to have you. So we'll jump right in. What games have you
Sure.
played previously before?
Well, that, my friend, is a very long list. I consider myself a gamer from the golden era of classic adventure games on the PC. So, going back to those, the days of Sierra, LucasArts,
Mm,
the big box games as they were. And if we were on camera, you'd see behind me, I've got a couple bookshelves full of old big box PC games because I have a weakness for collecting them, and
excellent.
much to my wife's chagrin, and the loss of space in our basement. But they'll always have a special place in my heart, and so that's sort of where I started. And then if we're talking MMOs, my first real MMO was Ultima Online, and it kind of actually connects to those big box games because that's where the Ultima games started out.
For sure.
But that was pretty short lived because my computer at the time couldn't. I don't think a lot of people's computers could really deal with Ultima Online, or at least my
Mm,
internet couldn't. It was too much, and so I didn't really play it for that long. I kind of dabbled, and then I got out. And then EverQuest, as with most people probably listening or in the community have some experience with EverQuest, maybe not, but I
right.
definitely did. And for me, it was my university days, which were like 1999. Well, I started university in '98, and then I was there until like 2002 ish. And I played EverQuest while I was there. Pretty much all the time because I was away from family and friends,
Mm,
and it became one of those ways of keeping me connected to my to home,
yeah.
because I was away from home. And yeah, spent a solid 4 or 5 years playing EverQuest, and that was my first real hardcore MMO.
Yeah.
Ever since then, like a lot of people, moved on to other games like EverQuest 2. Vanguard was I would consider my second sort of most played MMO. And then, if we're looking at more recent games, Guild Wars 1 and 2, Elder Scrolls Online, and that's pretty much it for modern stuff. But
Yeah.
and right now I'm not really involved in too many MMOs right now. I mean, I just tried Final Fantasy 14 for the first time about a couple weeks ago, because I wanted to. I figured I should probably have experienced this game at some point, and I tried it, and I'm sort of, I'm playing it, and not fully engrossed, but also playing a lot of single player games too still. So yeah, that's pretty much me. I'm sort of a renaissance gamer. I'll play every type of genre. There's nothing that I really haven't tried or would turn my nose up at. So
Right.
consider myself pretty open minded when it comes to games, and I'm usually up for anything.
Cool. What are some of the games that have really jumped out for you that stand out in your memory that you've really enjoyed more so than the rest?
Well, I mean, I definitely have my top five. I definitely have my top five games.
Yeah.
Like I said, the big box games. So Space Quest series is one of my all-time favorites. Probably Space Quest 3 is probably my favorite game of all time.
Oh,
I
cool.
absolutely love that
Yeah.
game. I've probably played it 50 times through, because it just brings up those nostalgia feelings.
Mm.
What else? What else would I say? Ultima 6 is awesome. I love Ultima 6 a lot. More recently, let's see. Hmm, what more recently? I don't know. I was just telling you before we started. Actually, I've been playing on my Switch. I've been playing Dragon Quest 11,
Mm.
and it is really cool because I probably haven't played a Dragon Quest game since the old NES games, like probably one or two, and this one's just sort of, I saw it on the Switch store or the Nintendo eShop or whatever, and I said, yeah, it looks good. It's really good. I'm I'm like 30, 40 hours into it, and not a lot of games get that kind of time for me these days. So um, yeah, I've really enjoyed it quite a bit, and so yeah, no, that's what I'm playing right now, and I could list off my other top games. Diablo 2. What else? The Pillars of Eternity series I really like a lot.
Uh huh.
Yeah, so I would say those are the sort of top five, if you will.
Cool. Excellent. So
Hmm.
what made you draw? What drew you to Pantheon? Why did you start following its development?
Let's see. I mean, I've always followed Brad McQuaid's,
Mm.
ever since EverQuest, and sort of followed his career because I thought it was really interesting, and just the way he's sort of, his whole story. And so, like a lot of people, I think that's what brought me in. So I pledged back in 2014 to the Kickstarter. Now we all know that didn't, that how that worked out, not so great. But I decided, that I knew that they weren't going to give up. I knew Brad wasn't the type to give up on a game, but I wasn't also going to follow. I wasn't going to wait for them to sort of see how things went out. Like, I'll step away. I'll let them find their angel investors, and if they're successful, I'll come back, and I'll see where things are at in a few years. So sure enough, like that's exactly what happened.
Mm.
They did find those angel investors, and I started, like I said earlier, paying attention again a couple of years ago pretty closely, and I saw how much progress had been made. Right,
Right.
so and if a company has a project and they're still going, they're still working at it, and it's still something they're passionate about so many years later, there's something special about it. There's something special going on.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment I was sitting at work and it was a slow day, and I was sort of like thinking about Pantheon. I'm like, look, if I'm going to commit to this, like, this is the kind of game that's going to need a community going in, right? Like, you're going to need to know, if you go in it without friends or without anybody sort of at your side, you're not going to have a good experience. And I don't think you're going to find happiness in this game like you want. So I decided, this is the point where I have to make that decision.
Mm.
I'm going to engage with the community, and I'm going to start following this game pretty closely. So I made that choice, and like I said, ever since it's been sort of an adventure, right? It's been sort of a fun ride, and one of the things that people in the community and say you hear a lot sometimes, Basgrim in particular says this a lot. Even if it doesn't work out, even if Pantheon never sort of comes to fruition, like, it's been a ride, and we've made friends along the way, right? And we've all sort of had this experience of getting involved in different projects or doing different things, whether it's fan fiction or whether it's content creation of any kind.
Right.
who cares? I mean, obviously I care. I want to play Pantheon, but at the end of the day, you are still going to have that experience under your belt. So I decided to commit to it. And I still feel great about the decision. And I'm working hard to try and make the game that they're creating into the vision that I hope it can be, and something that I want to experience, the kind of experience I want to have.
I mean, and can you imagine, when you first jumped in, like that you would have ended up as a co-host to another
No,
show, and
no, not at all. Actually, it's very strange because I've never been much of a I've had to work on public speaking quite a bit. Now my
mm,
job requires it a little bit, so I have had to sort of develop that skill. But I've never been a performer. I've never been into like a sort of a showmanship sort of thing, and that's not my personality. And so when I started this, I certainly couldn't have imagined, you know, doing things like this, and
right.
becoming doing a podcast kind of thing. So I'm shocked, but just so glad that it's worked out this way. And I have to give credit to Minus, because he's an amazing content creator and an amazing friend, at the heart of it too. And I used to tweet at him all the time before we started working together. I used to tweet at him, being annoying and just saying, like, you know, kudos to Minus. He's bringing community together. This guy's got it all figured out. Like, I was such a, fanboy that, he obviously probably just brought me in the team to shut me up, to stop tweeting him so that we could just talk directly. But no, in all seriousness, it's been crazy, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So
Cool. And well,
yeah.
since we've talked so much about Minus and Pantheon Plus, I definitely want to thank Minus for stopping in and give a shout out to the show. This show now is, I've spaced it so that we will be alternating with the Pantheon Plus show. So um,
Right.
yeah, just a big shout out to Pantheon Plus and everything you guys have been doing for the Pantheon community. It's just been absolutely incredible. So thank you.
Oh, no, hey, we're having fun. We're having
Good.
fun. That's the key thing.
Yeah,
If it's not fun, I wouldn't be doing
for sure. Good. Excellent.
it.
So, sort of, kind of morphing more into Pantheon. Brad had us, was known for his saying, "I want to make worlds, not games." For you, what turns a game into a world?
That's a great question, because I think it's a deceptively simple question, or a deceptively complicated question,
Mm,
actually. And I believe sort of video games have a lot in common with art. And I try to think of video games designers as artists. We've gotten away from that sort of thinking.
mm,
These days we think of them more as like engineers, or something else. I don't know what, but understanding Brad's role in designing EverQuest and Vanguard, I knew that if I truly felt that designers were akin to artists, like, this was something I had to support.
mm,
And his vision, you don't have to work to understand it. It always resonated with me when he said, "I don't want to make worlds. I want to make worlds, not games." I feel like he understands that that's what makes MMOs special, and there was never any doubt about it. It wasn't corporate speak. It wasn't advertising. It
right.
wasn't somebody who was repeating something that a PR person told them. So, and the thing is too, is that he understood it's about a world is about people, right? Worlds live and breathe. Communities are like organic, sort of, they're organisms, if you think about it. I mean,
Mm,
you have to take care of them. You have to nurture them, and sort of watch them grow. And when you're creating a world, understanding that that's the foundation of it is step one. And Brad never, like, there was never any doubt that Brad knew that, right?
mm,
And there's plenty of the people in the industry who I think don't understand that,
right.
and for whatever reason. And it's not to sort of, not trying to bash on other games, but there is a genuineness that there was a genuineness about Brad that I think always sort of resonated with me. And so, yeah, the world's not games things, man. That's just, it's like the perfect encapsulation of what I think it should be. So
For sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I really liked the what you said about world is really about the community, and I mean, and what helps turn it in a game into a world is that community, and just kind of going back to the tenets of Pantheon and how
yeah,
community matters. That I think yeah, it just speaks to that really clearly.
Yeah, and if you don't foster that, if you don't facilitate that, your world just becomes like I think of a lot of MMOs these days. They say people, MMOs are massively multiplayer games, but you're not playing with people. You tend to be playing beside people, you know.
Mm,
Um, it's very different experience, and you have to foster that interaction. You have to foster people playing with each other, not just beside each other. I can live in a condo and never talk to my neighbors, and I can say I live in a multi-suite condo or an but if I don't have a relationship with my neighbors, like it's not really, it's not a community.
right,
It's just a bunch of people living beside each other.
right.
So I there's just a philosophy that I think has gotten sort of diluted over the years quite a bit.
Well, which leads me. I mean, it's not one of our preset questions, but kind of this leads directly to something that I've been thinking about and curious about your take on it. Is I mean, we're here building a community before the game even launches, but you
Mm-hmm.
sort of touched on this a little bit. Like someone's experience that doesn't have that community coming in. How do we, onboard folks that aren't familiar with this type of game,
Yeah, it's a
bring
great
them into the
question.
fold and really show them the beauty of what a game that is built around community and
Yeah, it's a
you
great
know
question, and I really think it's pretty clear to me, at least. It's just about leading by example.
mm,
You demonstrate it. You show people what a healthy community looks like, and what people who enjoy um, each other's company looks like. And I think there's something just people want to be a part of that.
right,
People will gravitate towards it if they come in with an attitude that's not conducive to that. Then they just sort of get it's hard to connect, and they won't connect, and that's fine. And or they can choose to reevaluate their sort of way that they've connected in games in the past. Maybe they don't know, like you say, and they can find a new way to sort of relate to people. It is tricky. It is an interesting question, because I know, like, I've got two teenage kids, and they've never played a game. Like, I'm telling them about Pantheon, and they don't know anything about a game like this, right? They're
right.
like, well, so is it competitive? Like, is there a leaderboard, or is there, like, can do what, all these competitive ideas, all these
Right.
ideas of community is who's better at it. And
Mm,
and I'm like, well, it's not really like that. It's more about, like, just hanging out and being cool with each other, and being like enjoying the experience of you know just being human. And I try to tell them that, and I've got one of them committed to playing with me. So
oh, nice.
we're gonna work on it. But I'm looking at that from the perspective too, as, like, people who haven't played a game like EverQuest or other social game before, and it's like all you can do is lead by example and just sort of demonstrate it for them. And I think that's the best way to go.
Right, right. Uh, the crinkled one said, my 11-year-old has asked me, why do you play the game if it's so hard? Yeah, it's like this idea where when you bring people together to overcome challenges, and then the reward is just that much better.
Totally. Yeah, no, exactly. Like, Minus and I were talking the other day about which of the tenets sort of, means the most to us. And
Mm,
one of mine was, that shared experiences and overcoming challenges together are the most rewarding.
right.
And I really believe that. And I think you can find evidence of that all over the place if you really look for it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's funny, because it's like, why would you want to play a hard game? And somebody told me a long time, where I read it somewhere, but shared trauma creates bonds.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and I think I look back on my EverQuest days, and I'm like, that's exactly what was happening. These were traumatic experiences: losing my corpse,
Right.
getting slain, and having to stay up for 3 hours when I didn't want to in the first place, just to get my stuff back. Yeah, it was traumatic, but I had people with me that were helping me do that. And that we bonded over that. We bonded over the negative, not the negative experience, but like the traumatic experience of it. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at things. You don't want to make games traumatic necessarily. I mean, you're not talking about designing a game to be traumatic, but
Hook you up
making
to a
them
shot machine or
challenging,
something.
right? Like we don't want that necessarily, but we want to make them challenging enough that we're not just, we're not just, like I said earlier, beside each other. We're actually working together.
For sure.
Yeah.
Zelik asks, what was your worst corpse recovery in EverQuest?
Oh man, well, my worst one was the one where I didn't get my corpse back,
Oh
and
wow.
it was fortunately it was very early on in my EverQuest career. It was like a level 10, whatever Blackburrow was, because I started in Surefall Glade as a half elf ranger, and I went to Blackburrow completely unprepared for what it offered, and my corpse went down into there was a pit there with some crocodiles in it, and like a little, I never got my corpse back, and I learned from that moment that I better take this game a little more seriously, and I better not I better respect the environment a little more than I was. So I would say that it was traumatic, but in a learning kind of way.
For
There were
sure.
some other ones where it was like, I think Mistmore Castle had a few instances where I was up to the wee hours trying to get somebody to drag my corpse to the little entrance ledge, the little narrow cavern way that led into Mistmore Castle there.
Oh yeah.
Definitely trauma though.
Yes. Which, though, you touched on something that goes back to something we were talking about a little earlier about in the world's question, and you mentioned respecting the world, and that's another one that I think is really key in
Yeah.
creating that sense of a world, not a game. It's like when you are forced to really respect the world
Mm-hmm.
and in many ways fear it,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more vivid to
It
us.
really does. Yeah, it becomes it becomes, it becomes something that you have to account for,
Right.
you know, not, you're not just accounting for if, I don't know what I'm trying to think of a modern equivalent to it, because in the modern games, what you're accounting for is, how can I maximize my experience gain? How can I get to this? Like, how can I get through all this content to get to the good stuff? It's a totally different paradigm, right?
Right.
And back then, in a game where you respect the environment, you know, at any moment, if you're not being attentive, you could be facing a 2-hour corpse run. you know,
Right.
so it does. It makes it more vivid. I like the way you put it there. That's a good way of saying it.
Cool. Uh, Minus asks a question for you. He was curious how he puts up with his ridiculous content creator partner.
Well, it's I there's a lot of fringe benefits I get a platform for my crazy ideas for one.
Nice.
I get to annoy him with my elf love, and I get to make him angry and want to stab a lot of elves all the time. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Uh-huh.
So it's a two-way street. I put up with him, and he gets some benefit and I get some benefit as well. So
Excellent. Tech Ninja asks a really great question. Is there a novel that we currently have a bookmark in right now? What are we reading right now?
well, yes, I'm reading the Witcher novels right
Uh-huh.
now. I've read one of them, and I'm reading the second one. Actually, it's funny with the previous question with minus. The name of the novel I'm reading right now is Blood of Elves. I told that to him the other day, and it was quite funny. He was like, "Really? Is that the name of the novel you're reading?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the name of it." But
That's
I'm
funny.
halfway through it. I'm trying to get through them because they're quite good. So yeah, working on it. I'm a bit of I have a trouble. Time is a valuable commodity these days. So finding time to read is actually a little tricky sometimes. Between gaming and other responsibilities and whatnot. But yeah, when I have time, I'm reading the Witcher novels.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. For myself, there's a book I got from the library called Artemis, which I've been slowly reading by Andy Weir. It's
Okay.
kind of a strange story. I can't really describe
Hmm.
it takes place, obviously in another world universe. Um, but I keep going back. There's two long series that I read over and over. One is the Harry Dresden novels. I just get a
Right.
real kick out of those by Jim
Right.
Butcher. And then the Vorkosigan saga by Lois McMaster. I think it's Buhold is the way she pronounces her last name.
Hmm.
Just,
I'm not familiar with those ones.
oh man, they are just incredible character development. I highly recommend it to anyone that likes sci-fi
Hmm.
stories.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody the other day about looking for a novel. We were talking about audiobooks because I actually listen to quite a few audiobooks these days as well. And they were talking about the William Gibson novels,
mm,
in preparation for Cyberpunk
all
2077
right.
coming out,
Uh-huh.
saying that if you're into this genre, if you want to sort of be in this cyberpunk kind of world, the William Gibson novels are really foundational. And I'd never read any of them. I've never been a big cyberpunk, as a theme type of fan. But the but Neuromancer is something that was pointed out to me, and I've got it now on my list. I'm gonna try and give it a read before I jump into when the game comes out later this year, I think.
Sorry, guys,
And
about the dog noise. I was telling Therek earlier that I've been keeping my fingers crossed that they be quiet. So apparently they're not today.
they don't listen sometimes.
No, but it's their food time soon, so hopefully that'll take care of it. Excellent. Yeah, the Neuromancer. Yeah, I like William Gibson a lot as well. So I hope you enjoy it. So what? So is there a story behind your name, Theric?
It's funny actually. No, not really. But I remember when I came up with it, when, like I said, I started EverQuest, Surefall Glade, Half Elf Ranger, trying to think of a name that sounded half human,
Uh
half
huh.
elf, right? So I don't know. I just sort of one of those names that sort of I thought of, and it stuck.
Cool.
Nobody else had it. Was one of the qualifying things. It's always a tough one to get the name you want sometimes, but yeah, it was available, and it was actually harder for me to come up with a last name because when you got to level 20, right, you got your last name. Level
Mm,
20, I think it was level 20.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's level
Yeah.
20.
So I sat there for a long time thinking about it. I'm like, well, what are two things that sort of describe my character? And I was thinking about, well, I'm a sort of damage class, DPS, like to sort of burn stuff down. And then I also like to make arrows. I'm sort of a crafter if I'm going to make my own arrows. So I'll think, well, okay, well, Firefletch. I think that sounds like a good last name. So
Cool.
yeah, level 20, Therek Firefletch was born. And yeah, I've just sort of used it ever since because it's like I said, it's usually available and nobody
Yeah.
uses it.
No one's stolen it from you yet.
Nobody's stolen it from me. I did a little Google search the other day. I think there's one other person out there, but it's not like a gaming thing. And yeah, so availability is the best ability, sometimes.
For sure. Yeah. Especially
So
these days.
yeah, right. With so many gamers, right? Find a
Yeah.
unique name. It's like good luck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just sort of stuck with me, and it's funny because the fan fiction that I'm working on right now, in terms of building a story behind it, that was sort of the idea that I wanted to do with this piece that I'm working on, and because I never really had a backstory, and it's kind of strange. It's a strange feeling as I'm writing this because it's almost very personal, right? Because I've
Mm,
had this name for 20 years now, and I've sort of used it, and now I'm telling a story that's it's more difficult than I thought it would be to sort of reveal that, and
mm,
so it's sort of an interesting feeling, and I'm trying to overcome it as I write and as I go along, and realizing that telling this story is not it's a reflection of my character, and there might be little pieces interwoven of sort of real life into it just because that's what right, and that's what your brain sort of defaults to, but
right.
it is a very it's a very personal experience, and it's kind of interesting, so I'm enjoying the process of creating a backstory for Therek.
Cool. Yeah. You just brought up something that I hadn't really thought about, but just how much, you know, we do invest in our characters and how much, in many ways they become an extension of yourself
Hmm.
as
Yeah,
you're playing.
exactly.
Especially again in a world in a game that's more a world where yeah, you just
Yeah, well, yeah, a game where you become, when there's more social aspect to it, your character is more you. There's more reflection of yourself in there, right? If you don't need to interact with anybody, I can be Therek and nobody, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
But in a game like Pantheon, where who you are is going to be a part of, um, your experience, it's important to sort of know how you're gonna play it. Are you gonna just be you? And then I think about this a lot. I'm like, I'm sure that Pantheon will have an RP server, and I
Mm.
probably won't play on that server exclusively. I might have a shot, I might go at it, but
Right.
for me, my main character is not going to be an RP character, and I'm mostly just going to be playing me, right? But I do like to have that sort of availability of a backstory, I guess you would say, or like the uh, if I want to use it, it's there for me, or
Mm.
if I want to embrace it, I can. So, yeah, it does mean something in these more social games. It definitely has more context to it.
Right. Awesome.
Hmm.
Let's see. So what characters do you plan on? You sort of answered this already, but what characters
Yeah.
do you plan on playing
Well,
in Pantheon?
yeah. Like I said, my main is an elf ranger. Obviously, I've made that pretty clear along the way for people that listen to me. But in doing the fan fiction, one of the things I've noticed is I've created characters that I really now want to recreate in the game.
Mm.
So like I want to make a gnome enchanter. You know,
Excellent.
that's going to be my first alt for sure. And I think that I think that it's kind of like it'll be interesting to see how much of that is the representation of a story that I've written, or how much of it just sort of goes a different way.
Mm.
But there's also like sub characters in the story that I also think would be interesting characters to play. So I want to make a halfling druid. I want to make an archive monk. You know,
Cool.
the one that I'm writing right now, there's an ashen elf wizard in it that I really have sort of grown, and I could see myself playing a lot. So it's fun to sort of write these stories and then to have them available to you to play out in the world. Because back in the day, when you'd make an alt, it was more like I just wanted to experience this class a little bit. I wanted to see what it was, see what the skills of the monk had to offer. I wanted to try out a druid, that kind of thing. So when you create characters, it gives you other sort of avenues for exploration.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you're going to be like me. You're going to be an alcoholic. You're going to end up being an alcoholic.
I probably will have two, probably two or three. I'd imagine that's about it. But again, if we're playing Pantheon for like 10 years, maybe who knows?
We
Maybe
hope.
I'll.
Or keep our fingers crossed.
It could be a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. That's my wish.
Hmm. Exactly.
Well, and you sort of answered this with, so how do you come up with the backstory for your characters? Is it through the stories, or how?
Yeah, there's so I'll just when I start with a general idea, it's usually about some unique sort of feature or characteristic that I think would be fun to explore.
Mm.
So like for the piece that I've written, I thought it was really interesting for the gnomes, the way the gnomes are described in the lore. I wanted to explore their sort of connection to their, what happened to them, how they became these beings of energy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the interesting part for me. And when they came to Terminus, or before they came, they were actually consumed, or sort of, yeah, I guess consumed is the right word, but their physical beings were consumed, and they just became these energy forms, and I thought that's really cool. So there must be some connection to their past
Mm.
that is anchoring them here in Terminus. And they have this. They're also described in the lore as being sort of endlessly inquisitive, which is not uncommon in terms of gnomes and traditional gnomes. And
Right.
you think about things like races like Kender from the Dragonlance series and that kind of thing, like these endlessly inquisitive gnomes. But there was something more to it about the ones that in the Pantheon lore that really was unique, in that I think that they would make the same kind of mistakes over and over again,
Mm.
but they wouldn't stop making those mistakes. And that's kind of humorous to me, right? So I found that a good tool, a good starting place to build a story from.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually I do use a character builder, like a D&D type character builder, that I
Oh,
think
cool.
is very helpful with this kind of stuff too. So you know what's a flaw, what's a personal flaw, what's a phobia that they have,
Mm.
is there anything about them that you wouldn't expect, in like what's there, all these different categories. I think there's like 20, 30 different sort of features that it uses to help you build your character, and I do find that very useful.
That's cool.
Like for my current story, with my backstory as Therek, there's I had it as a kid, and again, this is like a reflection of real life stuff. But like as a kid, I had an experience where I was walking like in the woods, and my dad had told me not to go out in the woods because there was like bears. We were up north, northern Canada kind of thing, and my dad said, there's bears. Don't go outside. You're just a little kid. Obviously not a good idea. I decided not to listen to him. Right. I decided to go for a walk anyway, and I went for a walk. He knew I would, and he hid in the bushes and decided to scare the living daylights out of me. Right. And so he does this terrifying growl, and I was convinced there was a bear and I was going to die. I'm running back to the cabin that we were in and knocking on the door, banging on the door, trying to get in. I'm like, please, please, my mom lets me in, whatever. I'm fine, no big deal. Found out later that he was just trying to, teach me that it's not safe to go out in the woods like that, like by yourself. So when I'm writing Therek's character in my story, that's one of those things that I think is an interesting sort of, for an elf ranger, to have a real issue with bears. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those little touches that I think adds texture to it. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's silly and weird, but maybe people will read it and be like, think that's clever or whatever. But I think things like that are important. Little touches like that are important. So
For sure.
that's where I come from.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have you, Tech Ninja wanted to know the answer to this question. Have you written fan fiction for other games?
You know what? No, I have not. So my writing background is, I've always been a fairly decent writer. I mean, when in my job, I write fairly lengthy reports. And I have to use creative writing, but not in a fiction kind of way, more like in a just how I use my language sort of way. So I've always been good at that. That's what's gotten me to do what I am doing right now. So, but I wanted to take that and transition that into a fiction, writing fan fiction, a creative way. So, and like I said, I've never done this really before, and my approach to it was to just do it, just try it and see where it goes. And I didn't have any expectations for myself. I just sort of said, whatever happens, happens. However it turns out, it turns out. You're not under nobody's expecting anything of you, which is sometimes the easiest way to go about things, and yeah, no, it was kind of cool. And I didn't really know much even about fan fiction as a general thing, like I wasn't a big reader of fan fiction from other games I've played.
Right.
I know that there are some amazing fan fiction authors out there who have actually gone on to, write professionally, and it's sparked their career in a creative way, or even gone on to work at a company for the game that they've written about. I mean, I've heard those stories before, but I've never been a consumer of that. And I started reading the forums on pantheonmmo.com, and it's incredible, some of the fan fiction that's out there.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by it, honestly. Like the fact that somebody can be so entranced by the lore and inspired by the lore of a game to want to express a story that they have inside them using this universe and using the language and the terminology of this universe. I thought that's so neat. I just want to give it a shot. So I just sort of did it, and I have a huge respect for all the much more accomplished writers than me out there in the community. You had Ben and I, Tech Ninja as well, obviously, is an amazing writer, much better than me, and Ben and I as well. And I really look at them as sort of being the pros, and I'm just the amateur trying to learn how to do this and sort of work at it. And so that's my approach to it anyway.
I have to say, I'm really glad they have inspired you, because I've definitely, if you folks watching haven't read Talon's Tale, I definitely encourage you to do so. It's a great story and an engaging read. So definitely check it out.
I'll say this about it: it gets better by the chapter. And again, I'm saying it was like a test it out, see how it goes. You can tell chapter 1 is kind of like, I read it now and I'm like, okay. And then chapter 2, I'm like, all right, it's a little bit better. And chapter 3, okay, all right, definitely, making progress. And then I'm sort of pleased by the time we get to the end of it, and I'm like, okay, I can live with this. This is palatable.
So do you, when you're writing the story, do you worry about contradicting the lore of Pantheon, or are there ways you've sort of figured out to kind of get around?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had I've asked that same question of other authors,
Mm,
and I think it's really interesting some of the responses I get because I think everybody has there are quite a bit of different views about this. Um, and I sort of posed this question to my wife the other night. I'm like, what do you think about this? Like, how accurate do you think it needs to be? How, you know, spot on do you think it needs to be in terms of adhering to the lore? And she had kind of an interesting perspective on it. She said, I think you need to be absolutely like 100% accurate, and if something changes, maybe you need to go back and change it in your story. And I'm like, wow, that's hardcore. Like
mm,
I don't think I approach it the same way as that. I think that I have a more perspective of the lore that you're basing your story on and the universe that you're coming from is definitely the foundation, and it's the grounding for that, for your story.
mm-hmm.
And when fans are coming to read your story, they're looking for that kind of stuff. They're looking for, I want to see you, reference the races that are in the world. I want to see you reference the home world, or something about it that is familiar, and those hooks that draw the reader in,
Right.
because they could be reading anything. I mean, there's a billion fantasy worlds out there that authors have created, and if they're reading yours, it's because there's something about that world that they're interested in. So I do think you want to stay pretty close to the lore,
Mm-hmm.
but I would also say, sort of talk out of the other side of my mouth a little bit and say there's it's an interpretation.
Right.
Everybody reads the lore differently, so I can read what Justin Gerhardt, the lead writer for Pantheon, has written about something, and somebody else can read it and they might have a totally different interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're writing, you're sharing your worldview of that interpretation, and like the world and its inhabitants, that kind of thing. And if I make a mistake and I say something that's contradicts the lore, or if I do it sort of on purpose just for creative license, it's not the end of the world. I don't think it's the worst thing that can happen. And I think sometimes it is necessary actually to get creative, and to, because it is an art form.
Right.
It's not technical writing.
Right.
When I make videos, I kind of do. It's more on the other side where it is more technical, but I also try to use creative language in the scripts that I write for those as well, because I like to use it as sort of a mini creative writing project,
Mm.
even though I'm usually just using quotes and interpreting some of the stuff that we've seen in the videos or in the written stuff. But in writing fan fiction, I think that you get a little bit more room to move with that.
Right.
And honestly, the only person who's ever going to get it 100% right is Justin, right?
Yeah.
He's the man who created this world.
Yeah.
He's there. He's gonna, he writes the lore and it's canon. Whatever he writes is canon. So I don't think I don't think you can aspire to something like 100% accuracy. And if people don't like that I get a detail wrong, or if people get upset about that, well, that's fine. It is what it is. Sometimes, when I write for work, I think, I can only be right at this moment. Things
Right.
might change down the road. The facts might change, circumstances might change, but I'm writing it right now, and I'm doing the best I can to make it accurate for what it is right now. And I can live with that. So I think it's a bit of a road to walk, but you just do the best you can with it, and have fun. That's the most important thing. If you're not enjoying yourself, if it's an exercise in study, and like, you're just killing yourself trying to get it right, you're probably not doing it right.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. That makes total sense. I mean, we do this because we enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a job for us.
Yeah, I already have one of those.
Yeah. Exactly. So once Pantheon launches, do you plan on continuing the stories?
You know what? I don't know. I think that I hope so,
Uh huh.
but if I'm being perfectly honest,
Yeah.
I don't know how much time I'm going to have on my hands, 'cause I'm going to be
Right.
playing the game.
Pantheon's going to take up your whole free time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Minus and I are talking about this, and he's I was saying the other day, I'm like, "Oh, dude, I'm not going to stay up till all hours of the night anymore." He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you will, because we're going to be doing stuff. You're staying up till 4 in the morning." I'm like, "Oh boy,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I probably will." So I'd like to say yes. Probably over time, imagine I will, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of fun to. I think what I'll actually try to do is live out like I said, with the alts, some of the stories, right? Try and maybe follow a story that I've
Mm,
written up to this point. Like we've still got lots of time before the game comes, so
right.
I imagine I might write a few stories between now and then,
Excellent.
and that'll give you some some things to do, some stories to play out when the game comes, and we can all sort of live out those stories.
Excellent. Uh, Minus says that he's trying to convince you to do his write a story about his halfling trickster rogue. Be the
I do try to integrate rogue things into my videos sometimes. I try to I take little little digs at rogues in my videos sometimes, and
well, I
I don't know
guess
if he notices it or not. I think he does, but yeah, no.
only fair since he's such a hater of elves. So
I know I got to get my digs in somewhere, right?
yeah. Do you like to role play in games?
Well, like I said earlier, no.
Yeah.
I've never gone too far down the RP path. Um, the idea of it is very interesting to me,
Uh huh.
and I have a great respect for people who do the RP. I think it's a different level of engagement with the game that is it's almost akin to being an actor, being a
Mm,
performer.
for sure. Yeah.
And I've never had a penchant for drama at
Mm.
all.
Mm-hmm.
I avoided drama class in school like I the best I could, because I'm not that kind of person. But
Right.
so I think that's a different type of personality that is into that, and I don't but I wouldn't be averse to it if somebody said, we've got a guild going on an RP server, and we every couple of weeks or something like that, we get together and we sort of do RP events. That's a fun thing to me, and that sounds like fun.
Cool.
It's just a matter of having to give it a fair shake and give it a try, and who knows, maybe it's something that's always been I've never experienced, and maybe it's something I'd love. I really don't know, but and I think about RP, I think about playing D&D on paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I'm probably one of the few people I've played D&D on paper maybe 4 or 5 times in my
Yeah.
life. And when we did play, we never did much RP, but I know that it sort of, again, it engenders, like, it's got an RP flavor to it, and a lot of people do engage that way. And again, I have the same feeling. I always respected people who could do that, and I enjoyed watching that for sure. It's quite entertaining.
Yeah.
But myself personally, no, I wasn't. I didn't have the chops to pull off the RP.
Yeah, it's totally cool. I think about that a lot as someone who I loved. I come from a D&D background. That's what has drawn me into these games.
Right.
Um, but especially as a video game, most players don't come from that that angle.
Right.
And yeah, how do you draw folks in and just get them to enjoy and engage and invest? It's sort of a, again, we were talking about investing in your character, and
Hmm.
how do you get them to invest just that one step further where they're kind of living and breathing and talking their thoughts.
Yeah, it's good question, and I think the problem is that games are very the speed of games has gone up so much. D&D is a very slow game, right? Like,
Right.
as you know, I mean, you can spend 6 hours, and really not make much progress. And in video games and MMOs particularly, we don't really accept that anymore these days. We expect, really fast, um, uh, nonstop sort of blow your hat off action, and it doesn't lend itself to that kind of approach
Right.
for an RP. I know there are guilds. I mean, I'm thinking about RP in modern MMOs, and I actually think Elder Scrolls Online is a good example of a game that fosters RP a lot. I don't like Elder Scrolls as much anymore. I played it a lot when it came out, and I don't enjoy it anymore at all.
Mm.
But I think there are really good things about that game for the RP crowd. It allows for a lot of personalization, customization, and I hope that kind of is available in Pantheon for the RP crowd. And it could be sort of the thing that nobody's talking about with Pantheon
Mm.
too, and from an RP standpoint, that with the perception system, with the ability to go back and sort of talk to people that they might have different things to say based on your flagging and what you've done in the world. Excuse me. And I think it might really be secret a secret weapon for Pantheon, that it's going to really speak to those RP people. And again, depending on how much customization it allows for, and those kinds of things. But because it's also slower,
Right.
and the action isn't so fast paced, it gives people time to actually act out their character and to do things in character. When you're playing a game that is so fast, how do you do that?
Right.
How do you be your character?
Definitely makes it more challenging.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
excellent. Well, um, do we have any more questions from our community here for Therek?
All these people in chat, they must have some question. Although I talk a lot in Discord, so they probably probably know everything they want to know about me at this point.
Well, I want to thank you again. We got in a good 50-minute. Oh, Tech's got a question here. When are you thinking about giving us a glimpse of your current writings?
I knew he was going to ask that. I thought him or Ben and I would probably chime in on that. Yeah. Oh man, it's a slow process. Again, in the journey of learning to write, I found it to be very mood dependent. You can't force it when you don't feel like it. The mood has to strike, and you have to be in a headspace where you're ready to commit to being creative and sitting down. So to be honest, it's slow going now. I've the whole story is outlined, and I've written about, I don't want to say 6 or 7 chapters of it. But I every time I look back at the outline, I keep adding new chapters is the problem. So it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I think, okay, well, it's got to stop here. So what I was going to do initially, what I wanted to do, because I put Talon's Tale on the forums in parts, right? Chapters 1 through 4, and then for the 5th chapter, I compiled it all and put it into a PDF document and released it as a whole. And I really want to do it all at once with this story. I don't want to do it piecemeal, chapter by chapter. But I've sort of reconsidered that a little bit, and I'm thinking about doing it maybe in thirds, so doing part 1, part 2, and part 3, which will each consist of maybe 4 or 5 chapters, and doing it that way. Just because it's I do want to. It's motivating as well to put it out there. Once you've got something out there, then you're motivated to continue to write, and it can sort of be the fire that keeps you moving forward. When I was making in making videos, I've sort of found that that's a good technique for me to stay motivated. If I make something in a series, so part 1 of a series, and and I put that out there, then I know I have to make part 2. So right. I'm committed to it, and it keeps me motivated. So thinking maybe it's a good idea to do it the same way with this. I do hope that, but I want it to be right too. I don't want to. This is going to be like it's a darker sort of tone than Talon's Tale, and it sort of goes. I want it to hopefully be a little deeper and more of an evolution of just me, just how I write and sort of doing things. So it'll be done when it's done. I'll take the VR approach and say no dates.
Soon.
I'll say, it's in pre-alpha status right now. My tale is in pre-alpha testing.
Excellent answer. Thank you.
There you go.
So, Minus asks, without spoiling, what can you tell us, people, about what to expect on this week's Rewind?
Oh boy,
So
what a great
Pantheon,
question. Yeah.
Pantheon
How can I do this without spoiling it? Well, let me say this. You don't want to miss it, for one. And in the Pantheon community, we are always hungry for details. We want to know, we want to know what's up. We want to hear things that inspire us. We want to feel good about the future of Pantheon.
Right.
Let me just leave it at that and say, check it out on Sunday, and you'll probably feel pretty good about all those things.
Cool.
Redacted by Therek. Yeah. That's exactly. I'm redacting as I'm speaking.
Gul asks, what's surprised you the most about working with Minus?
What surprised me the most about working with Minus? Oh boy.
delving deep into the Pantheon Plus community
Yeah,
here.
I don't know. He's pretty apparent. They're not he lets everything out. He doesn't hold back, I don't think. So when I say surprise, I knew what I was getting into when I reached out to sort of engage with him as a content creator and as a person. And I don't know, and not much surprised me. He's very creative. I guess maybe that's not a surprise to everybody, but the depth of his creativity is something that I was surprised that. I always knew he had a good, he's great on screen. He's great, personality. He's great conversationalist.
Mm.
But he's an intensely creative mind. It's crazy the things that when he gets an idea. We were talking the other day, and he was not feeling great, but he's like laying in bed sick, and he's coming up with ideas and ideas and ideas about the show and Pantheon Plus. And I told him, I'm like, man, you do sickness way better than I do. Like, I sit there feeling sorry for myself, devoid of any sort of creative thought, and you're like churning out this firestorm of ideas.
Awesome.
It's crazy. And I don't know. I think he drinks a lot of Monster Energy drinks, so that might have something to do with it. But
Maybe that's a sponsor we can look into. You guys can look into.
exactly, yeah. Why? That's a great idea. Why haven't we thought of that yet? We need a coffee sponsor and a Monster Energy sponsor, and then we're good. And a beer sponsor as well, because we both drink a lot of beer. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Is there any particular brew? Since this is the Terminus Tavern, we got to talk beer a little bit, I guess. Is there a particular brew you guys like?
Well, I mean, I won't speak for him. I know he's got a Michelob is his I think his go-to beer. For myself,
Uh-huh.
I'm drinking a Heineken right now.
Nice.
I tend to like the lagers, the pilsners. Um, I live in Canada, so we have lots of great beer up here. Molson, Labatt's, that kind of stuff. But a lot of craft beer too. The small breweries. There's a brewery in Alberta called Big Rock that I'm a big fan of.
Uh-huh.
They make quite a big selection of craft ales of different types, and they with winter coming up, they do a winter beer that I absolutely love,
Mm.
and it's just awesome. I can't wait till they don't sell it during the summer, so you got to wait for it. But yeah, no, I enjoy. But when I'm just summer beers, Heineken's a good one. Moosehead, also a good one. Hmm.
Excellent. Very cool. The Crinkled One asks a really great question here. If you could have one class added to the list, I'm assuming he's talking about Pantheon before
Hmm.
launch, which would you choose?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is obviously Bard.
Mm.
Everybody loves bards, myself included. I trying to think of other options. There's not much else. I mean, I'll change it up a little bit, and I'll say if there was a race I would add, it would be a half elf,
Mm.
because I could go back and relive my half elf glory days. But there is no half elf in Pantheon. It's
Right.
full elf for humans. So um, yeah, but I'll stick with the crowd and say bard, because bards are awesome. Can't
Yeah.
argue with that.
Right on. Yeah, I'm really hoping that the Bard sees daylight, at least if not at launch, soon after.
Yeah,
That's a class that's near and dear to my heart as well.
yeah. They're just so much fun, like they're so and we need a good another utility control class, right? We only have the enchanter, and
Right.
we need another class like that to go into the mix of group dynamics. So yeah, hopefully.
Cool. Well, no worries. It's all good. Showing up. We're actually kind of wrapping up. If you have any other questions, we'll ask Therek here before we head out for the night. But we've been having a great chat for the past hour, and really
Yeah,
appreciate you
absolutely.
coming on
Yeah,
the
lots of
show.
fun. No, I love what you've done with your Discord with the tavern. I love the theme of a tavern, and I think that like the way you've kept the sort of the channels in your Discord small, just the few here and there, so it's not overwhelming. And then just sort of when I go out, when we go out for a drink or whatever, and back in the day with my friends, some of them would want to go to a club, and some of them would want to go to like a big sort of flashy bar, and I was always much more into the small
Mm,
pub, the Irish pubs, the the quaint place with the fireplace in the middle. Love that. I love that theme and love that feel of that. So
right.
I love what you're doing with the idea here.
Oh,
So
well, thank you. Yeah, well, we've been having a lot of fun, and as always, I invite everyone that sees the stream uh, to please join us over at the tavern. Everyone is welcome. We have a brew or a, a food for all tastes. So come join us and and enjoy the come join the fun.
absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll wrap up the show here. We will be doing our next show in 2 weeks on Thursday evening, again at 6 p.m. And then I will have Tech Ninja as my special guest, and I'm really
That's
excited
awesome.
to have him on. So thank you all for showing up and making this just a really great evening. I love the questions and the chat. You guys have been keeping it lively, and I really appreciate that. Um, so I invite you all to reach out and game with someone, and have a great evening. Thanks for stopping
Awesome.
in.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for coming.